The chipped formica of the kitchen table felt cold under Liam's forearms. Rain lashed against the window of the small trailer, mimicking the relentless drumming of anxiety in his chest. Another notice slipped under the door this morning, stark white against the peeling brown paint. Final demand. The lettering practically vibrated with threat. He hadn't touched the coffee cooling in his mug, didn't deserve a warm drink when bills were piling up like cordwood. Liam O'Connell, 38, and once a name whispered with respect in Kentucky horse country, was circling the drain. 5 years ago, a bad investment, Finney, a friend's sure thing in a breeding venture that imploded faster than a cheap saddle. Finney had stripped him of his own small farm, his security, his pride. Now he patched together a living as a freelance vet, mostly late. Night foalings and emergency calls no one else wanted. The respectable practices in Lexington didn't return his calls anymore. He rubbed a hand over the stubble, rasping his jaw, debts to the bank, to supply companies, and worst of all, a steadily accruing sum owed to local men who weren't known for their patience. He hadn't slept a full night in weeks, jumpy at every truck that pulled into the yard, every ring of the phone. The phone rang. He snatched it up, hope flaring briefly, then dying as he recognized the area code. "Yeah, O'Connell, still breathing, I see." The voice, gravelly and devoid of inflection, belonged to Cole Hauser, the man currently enjoying the fruits of Liam's misfortune, a friend of the original sure thing who hadn't shared the loss. "Just barely, Cole. Thought you might be, heard you've been macking rounds, keeping busy or avoiding me." Both. Liam gripped the phone tighter, knuckles white. "Don't play coy, Liam. You know what is owed. And interest is compounding rapidly. I'm working on it." A pathetic lie, Hauser chuckled, a sound like stones grinding together. "Work faster, my patience ain't endless." The line went dead. Before Liam could even lower the phone, it rang again. Different number, an unfamiliar area code. He hesitated, then answered. "Dr. O'Connell," a clipped, refined voice, a world away from Cole Hauser's menace, speaking. "This is Silas from Blackwood Farm. We're having complications. One of our mares is in labor, and we require your immediate assistance." Blackwood Farm, even the name carried weight. It wasn't just a farm. It was an institution, a legacy. Elias Thorne, the owner, was notoriously private, a billionaire recluse who bred champion thoroughbreds and didn't suffer fools. Liam hadn't set foot on the property in 10 years, not since a dispute over a treatment plan with Thorne's former head vet. "What kind of complications?" Liam asked cautiously. He didn't want to get involved in anything messy, especially if it meant incurring another expense, foreign equipment, medication. Time he didn't have. "The mare is experiencing a difficult labor. We need someone experienced. And immediately your reputation precedes you, doctor." The compliment felt hollow, a relic of a past life. He needed the money desperately. "I can be there in 40 minutes. The rain hadn't let up when Liam pulled through the wrought iron gates of Blackwood Farm. The house, a sprawling Gothic mansion, loomed in the distance, dark and imposing against the stormy sky. The farm itself was immaculate, eerily so. Every barn, every fence post, perfectly maintained. It felt less like a working farm and more like a stage set. Silas, a thin man with a severe expression and a starched shirt, met him at the main barn. He didn't offer a handshake. "Dr. O'Connell, thank you for coming so quickly. The mare is in stall 8. Her name is Nightshade." The air inside the barn was thick with the smell of hay, disinfectant, and something else, something metallic and unsettling. Nightshade, a magnificent black mare, was clearly in distress. She thrashed in the stall, her flanks heaving, eyes rolling white. "She has been in labor for over 4 hours, Silas said, his voice tight. "The foal is malpositioned. We've tried everything." Liam quickly assessed the situation. Nightshade was exhausted, bordering on collapse. The foal was stubbornly breech. He had to act fast. He suited up, applying lubricant and gently maneuvering his hands inside the mare, working to correct the foal's position. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his muscles straining with the effort. Time seemed to warp and stretch. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he felt a shift, a surge of pressure. And then the foal emerged. But the moment it hit the straw-covered floor, Liam recoiled. It wasn't right. Foals were clumsy, awkward creatures. But this was different. Its frame was distorted, limbs bent at unnatural angles. The head was too large for the body. And the skin, it wasn't the soft, velvety coat of a newborn. It shimmered, an unsettling iridescent sheen, shifting between shades of purple, green, and blue. It looked less alive than food-altered deity. The foal struggled to right itself, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. Its cry wasn't the usual high-pitched whinny. It was a rasping, guttural sound that sent a shiver down Liam's spine. Silas stared, his face pale and drawn. Liam, despite his years of experience, felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He'd seen difficult births, stillbirths, even congenital defects. But to the sea this defied explanation. It felt unnatural, something ripped from a nightmare. What is it? Silas stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Liam could only shake his head, his mind racing. Genetic mutation. Some kind of environmental toxin. He'd never encountered anything like it. A shadow fell over them. Elias Thorne, a man who seemed to carry the weight of centuries on his shoulders, stood in the doorway, his eyes cold and gray fixed on the foal. He didn't say a word, but his presence filled the barn, suffocating the air. This is unacceptable. Thorne's voice, when it came, was a low, gravelly rumble. Mr. Thorne, Liam began, we need to run some tests. Determine what caused this, ensure it doesn't happen again. Thorne cut him off with a wave of his hand. There will be no tests. No investigations. This aberration never happened. Liam stared, dumbfounded. But the mare, the foal, they need care, and we need to understand what went wrong. Secrecy, Doctor, absolute secrecy. That is my only concern. Thorne's gaze didn't waver. The foal is to be disposed of discreetly, and you, Doctor, will make no mention of this to anyone. To no one, do you understand? The threat wasn't explicit, but it hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Liam understood perfectly. Disposed of. Liam repeated, his voice hoarse. He looked at the struggling, iridescent foal, a creature fighting for its life against impossible odds precisely. Thorne's eyes narrowed. My people will handle the arrangements. Liam felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He'd taken an oath to preserve life. Not to facilitate his quiet erasure, but he was a man on the edge, haunted by debt and threatened by dangerous men. He couldn't afford to cross Elias Thorne. I understand, he mumbled, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Good. Thorne turned and walked away, disappearing back into the shadows of the mansion. Silas, who hadn't spoken since Thorne's arrival, gave Liam a look of helpless resignation. Liam spent the next hour tending to Nightshade, administering fluids and antibiotics. The mare was weak, but she would recover. The foal, however, was receiving no care. Two of Thorne's men, silent and impassive, stood guard by the stall, their eyes cold and watchful. As Liam prepared to leave, a deep, gnawing unease settled over him. This wasn't just a strange birth, it felt like something far more sinister. The secrecy, Thorne's chilling detachment, the unnatural appearance of the foal. It all pointed to something hidden, something deliberately concealed. He glanced back at the foal, its iridescent skin glowing faintly in the dim light. It was a freak, an anomaly, but it was still a living creature. He was barely out of the gate when his phone rang again. The same unfamiliar number. He hesitated, then answered. Dr. O'Connell, a distorted voice whispered, barely audible above the rain. We know about the foal, we know about the mark. Liam froze. The mark, he hadn't heard that phrase in over 15 years. It was a relic of his past, a warning whispered amongst a small circle of horsemen who believed in old forgotten things. Who is this? He demanded, his voice shaking. It doesn't matter, just listen. Stay silent about what you saw, don't ask questions. For your own good. What mark? The line crackled with static. The one you carry, Doctor, the one that brought you to Blackwood Farm tonight. Some doors are best left unopened. Before Liam could respond, the line went dead, leaving him standing in the pouring rain, his blood running cold, the image of the iridescent foal. And the cryptic warning burned into his mind. It wasn't just his livelihood on the line anymore. He had a feeling his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. The rain had stopped, leaving a damp, oppressive silence in its wake. Liam sat hunched over his laptop in the cramped office of his veterinary clinic. the glow of the screen illuminating the lines etched around his eyes. He'd been online for hours, scouring veterinary databases, genetic research papers, anything that might explain the foal's bizarre mutation. Iridescent skin wasn't just a rare anomaly. It was non-existent. He'd found cases of leucism, albinism, even bizarre pigmentations, but nothing remotely close to the shifting, otherworldly sheen he'd witnessed. He typed equine genetic mutations into the search engine for the 10th time, frustration mounting. The results were a monotonous parade of common ailments and easily explained conditions. It was like the foal didn't belong in this world, its biology operating outside the established rules. He tried contacting a colleague at a university research facility, framing his inquiry as a hypothetical case study. But the response was polite dismissal. Sounds unusual, Liam, almost fantastical. Probably a strong pigment issue. Fantastical. That is how it felt. And the more he thought about it, the more unsettling it became. The clinic phone rang, jarring him from his research. It was Silas, his voice even more clipped and formal than before. Dr. O'Connell, Mr. Thorne requests your presence at Blackwood Farm immediately. He wishes to discuss Nightshade's recovery. I was just researching the foal's condition, Liam said, his tone carefully neutral. I believe a thorough examination is warranted. Mr. Thorne's decisions are final, Doctor. The line went dead, the abruptness sending another chill down Liam's spine. Thorne wasn't interested in a scientific investigation. He wanted control, and he wanted silence. Blackwood Farm felt even more oppressive in the daylight. The mansion loomed, a gray monolith against the overcast sky. Thorne met him in the same barn, his expression unreadable. Nightshade is responding well to treatment, I trust. She is, Liam replied, bypassing the pleasantries. But we still haven't addressed the foal. Its condition requires immediate attention. Thorne's eyes narrowed. The foal is being taken care of, in a manner befitting its unique circumstances. What does that mean? Liam pressed, his patience wearing thin. It means I have made arrangements. Thorne's voice was a low warning. Your concern is irrelevant. Your task is complete. You fulfilled your professional obligation. Now, I expect you to maintain your discretion. Discretion isn't the issue, Mr. Thorne. It is the ethical implications. This foal deserves answers. We need to understand what happened. Thorne stepped closer, his presence intimidating. You misunderstand, Doctor. Some questions are better left unasked. Some truths are better left buried. Consider this a friendly piece of advice. He paused, his gray eyes boring into Liam's. Your financial situation is precarious, I believe. It would be a shame if certain parties were reminded of your outstanding debts. The veiled threat hung in the air. Thick and suffocating, Liam clenched his fists, fighting to control his anger. Thorne wasn't just controlling, he was actively intimidating him. I understand, Liam said through gritted teeth, but I still maintain that a proper investigation is necessary. Thorne simply turned and walked away, dismissing him with a curt wave of his hand. The message was clear, back off. Leaving Blackwood Farm, Liam felt a gnawing sense of helplessness. He couldn't directly confront Thorne without putting himself in a dangerous position. He needed information, something to give him leverage. He decided to start with his colleagues. He visited Dr. Eleanor Vance, an older, respected veterinarian who had been practicing in the area for decades. They'd worked together on several cases in the past, and he trusted her judgment. Eleanor, I need your opinion on something, he said, recounting the details of the foal's birth, carefully omitting the name of the farm. I've seen some strange things in my career, but this was different. Iridescent skin, skeletal deformities. I can't find anything in the literature that even comes close. Eleanor listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. That's even unusual. Very unusual. Have you considered a genetic testing service? I tried. They dismissed it as a pigmentation issue. I'm worried it is something more. And there is something off about the entire situation. Eleanor's expression grew guarded. You know, there has been talk, whispers around the paddock, shall we say, about the Equinox Group, a shadowy breeding syndicate, very exclusive, very secretive. Rumor has it they're involved in experimental breeding, pushing the boundaries of what is genetically possible. Some say they're funded by very powerful people who don't care about ethics only results. Liam felt a jolt of recognition. The secrecy, the control, the unnatural appearance of the Foal, it all fit. "Have you ever had any direct dealings with them?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head. "Never, and I wouldn't recommend it. They operate in the shadows. They have ways of silencing people who ask too many questions." He spent the rest of the afternoon making discreet inquiries, piecing together fragments of information. The Equinox Group was a legend, a dark undercurrent in the world of thoroughbred breeding. They were said to be obsessed with creating the perfect racehorse. Regardless of the consequences, he discovered that Blackwood Farm had been facing significant financial difficulties in recent years. Whispers of mounting debts and potential foreclosure had circulated amongst local horsemen. But then, a few months ago, the farm had received a substantial influx of cash from an anonymous source, turning its fortunes around. The pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a disturbing picture. Thorne, desperate to save his farm, had apparently entered into a deal with the devil. As dusk settled, Liam returned to his clinic, his mind reeling. He felt like he was wading through a swamp, the truth obscured by layers of deception and fear. He was about to shut down his computer for the night when he noticed something wasn't right. His office door was slightly ajar, and a stack of files on his desk had been disturbed. The folder containing his notes and photographs of the Foal the ones he hadn't shared with anyone was askew, papers slightly scattered. His heart pounded in his chest. He'd locked the door when he left for Blackwood Farm. He quickly scanned the room, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Nothing appeared to be missing. No equipment was damaged, no valuables were taken. It was like someone had been searching for something specific, then left without taking anything. A warning, a chilling message that someone was watching him, someone who wanted him to back off. And this time the threat felt far more immediate, far more real. The whispered warnings. It wasn't just folklore, he was in danger.
The chipped ceramic of the coffee mug warmed Liam's hands, but did little to quell the tremor running through him. He hadn't slept properly in days, the image of the disturbed files in his office replaying in his mind with every blink. He needed answers, and he needed them fast, but he was walking on eggshells, acutely aware that every move he made was being observed. He decided to seek out Amelia Hayes. It was a last resort. Their relationship had fractured years ago, a casualty of his youthful ambition and her eccentricities. But Amelia was brilliant, a pioneer in equine genetics, who'd been ostracized by the scientific community after making some controversial claims about artificial selection and bloodline manipulation. She'd seen things, understood things, that others dismissed as madness. Finding her wasn't easy. Amelia had retreated from the world, setting up a secluded laboratory on a remote stretch of coastline north of Lexington. The dirt road leading to her property was overgrown, the house itself shrouded in a veil of neglect. She answered the door, wearing a faded lab coat and a wary expression. Her once vibrant red hair was streaked with grey, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond mere age. "Liam," she said, her voice raspy, "I haven't seen you in, 8 years? Amelia, I need your help." Her lips curved into a sardonic smile. "So, the prodigal son returns when he is in trouble. This isn't about us. It is about a foal, a mutated foal. I think it is connected to something bigger, something dangerous." He recounted everything. ID, the iridescent skin, the skeletal deformities, Elias Thorne's secrecy, the Equinox Group. Amelia listened in silence, her eyes fixed on his face, studying every nuance of his expression. When he finished, she didn't offer sympathy or reassurance, only a grim nod. "The Equinox Group," she said, her voice low and gravelly. "I suspected they hadn't disappeared. I thought they'd finally run out of money or common sense. What do you know about them?" Amelia led him into her laboratory, a chaotic space filled with beakers, microscopes, and anatomical charts. The air smelled of chemicals and dust. They're an old organization, tracing their roots back to the early days of thoroughbred breeding. Originally, they were a group of wealthy enthusiasts who sought to perfect the breed through selective breeding, but over time, their ambitions grew darker. She gestured to a collection of antique books and journals on a shelf. They started experimenting with more radical techniques, inbreeding, genetic manipulation, even rumored attempts at creating chimeras, all fueled by a relentless pursuit of speed and dominance. Chimeras, combining genetic material from different species, horrific stuff. Thankfully, most of it was theoretical, but they've always been at the forefront of pushing boundaries, regardless of the ethical implications. And they have influence. They are the industry, Liam. They own stables, control breeding programs, and have connections in high places. They can make or break careers with a single phone call. Anyone who speaks out against them tends to disappear. Liam felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. This was far bigger than he'd imagined. What about the mutation? Could the Equinox Group be behind it? Amelia tapped a long, slender finger on a blueprint of a horse's skeletal structure. It is possible. They've been known to tamper with bloodlines, introduce foreign genes, anything to achieve their desired results, especially if they are attempting to bring back traits or eliminate undesirable ones. The iridescent skin. That is new, however, extremely new. Thorne's farm has been receiving anonymous investment, a lot of money. I think he is involved. Amelia's expression darkened. Thorne, I've heard whispers. He has always been ambitious, ruthless, desperate to restore his family's legacy. She turned to a computer terminal and began typing furiously. Let's see what we can find. After a frantic search through historical records and equine databases, Amelia unearthed something disturbing. Blackwood Farm had experienced several other unusual births in the past, subutine foals exhibiting bizarre deformities and genetic anomalies, incomplete, and in several cases, conveniently scrubbed from official databases. They've been trying this for years, Amelia said, her voice tight with anger, experimenting, concealing, covering up their mistakes. And now, it appears they've finally achieved something significant. But why? I don't know. Maybe they're trying to create a new breed, one that is faster, stronger, more resilient. Maybe they're searching for a specific trait, something hidden deep within the equine genome. She paused, her eyes meeting Liam's. Or maybe they're simply playing God, because they can. Liam felt a chilling realization creep over him. This wasn't just about breeding a better racehorse. This was about control, about manipulating life itself. And the foal, with its iridescent skin and grotesque deformities, was just the latest casualty in their relentless pursuit of power. Be careful, Liam, Amelia warned, her voice barely a whisper. The Equinox Group doesn't play fair. They'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets. He thanked Amelia, promising to keep her informed. As he drove back towards Lexington, he pulled over and checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Silas. He ignored them. He needed time to process everything he'd learned. He needed a plan. He decided to pay another visit to Dr. Vance. He wanted to confirm his suspicions about Blackwood Farm's past. Eleanor, do you have any records of unusual births or genetic anomalies at Blackwood Farm from, say, the last 15 years? Eleanor hesitated, her expression guarded. That is a delicate question, Liam. Blackwood Farm is influential. People are hesitant to talk. I need to know, Eleanor. I think something dangerous is happening there. Eleanor sighed and disappeared into the back room, returning a few minutes later with a dusty box filled with archived veterinary records. These are unofficial copies, she said, handing him the box. I made them years ago, when I first started hearing rumors about strange experiments at Blackwood Farm. I felt uneasy. The records confirmed Amelia's findings. Several foals born at Blackwood Farm within the last decade had exhibited similar genetic anomalies, sipid, skeletal deformities, unusual coat colorations, and unexplained organ failures. In each case, the records were incomplete. The investigations quickly shut down. Thorne, it seemed, had a knack for making problems disappear. Liam was putting the box back into his car when he noticed a figure watching him from across the street. It was a farmhand from Blackwood Farm, a hulking man named Jake, who he'd seen working around the stables. Jake hadn't said a word, but his expression was clear. He knew Liam was asking questions, and he wasn't happy about it. He met Jake's gaze for a moment, then quickly looked away. He felt a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. "Just remember, Doctor," Jake called out, his voice carrying across the street. "Some things are best left forgotten. Some stones are best left unturned." The veiled threat hung in the air, chilling him to the bone. He knew he was walking a dangerous path, but he couldn't turn back now. He had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. He drove straight back to Amelia's lab, needing to warn her of the increased risk, wanting to see if she'd found anything further. But as he neared the property, he saw flashing emergency lights in the distance. He slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest. The scene that awaited him was far worse than he could have imagined. Amelia's lab was surrounded by paramedics and police officers. The door was ajar, the interior a chaotic mess, and lying on the floor, amid scattered papers and broken glass, was Amelia herself. Unconscious, Liam pushed past the police tape, his voice hoarse with panic. "What happened?" A police officer shook his head. "We received a call from a neighbor, said they saw someone leaving the property a few hours ago. Found Dr. Hayes like this. No signs of forced entry, but it looks like she was." Assaulted, he rushed to Amelia's side, his hand trembling as he checked for a pulse. It was faint, but there, his gaze fell on Amelia's desk. Amongst the chaos, a single object stood out, stallion feather, lying directly on top of her research notes, the symbol of the Equinox Group, a chilling message of warning, or a promise of things to come. The sterile scent of the hospital hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of Amelia's fragility. She lay in a medically induced coma, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred, charting the uncertain rhythm of her life. Liam sat by her bedside, his hand clasped tightly in hers, guilt gnawing at him. He'd brought this down on her, dragged her back into a world she'd tried so hard to escape. Detective Reynolds, a grizzled veteran with weary eyes, stood beside him. "We're treating this as aggravated assault. No obvious signs of robbery. Looks like someone wanted to send a message." "The Equinox Group," Liam said, his voice raspy. "They're behind this." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "That is quite an accusation. Doctor, do you have any proof? Circumstantial." "But they've been threatening me, intimidating anyone who gets too close. They're involved with the Foal, with Blackwood Farm." Reynolds made a note in his pad. "We'll look into it, but we need more than speculation. These groups, if they exist, tend to operate in the shadows." Liam spent the next few hours poring over Amelia's research notes, searching for a clue, anything that might explain the mutation and lead him to the Equinox Group. He discovered a meticulous analysis of the affected foals. Pedigrees. Amelia had identified a common ancestor, a legendary black stallion named Night Wanderer, a Triple Crown winner from the 1980s, renowned for his speed and stamina. She, D-written, possesses a unique genetic marker, a recessive gene that appears to be a key component in their experiments. They retrying to amplify it, to unlock its potential. Liam felt a jolt of recognition. He'd heard stories about Night Wanderer, about his uncanny abilities and his mysterious lineage. But he hadn't realized the stallion held such significance. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his daughter, Emily, a picture of her and her classmates at the school's annual science fair. A pang of worry twisted in his gut. He hadn't told Emily about the danger, about the threats. He didn't want to burden her, to fill her young life with fear, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd made a mistake. His thoughts were interrupted by a jarring flashback. He was younger, reckless, drowning in debt. He was in a smoky back room, a card table surrounded by shadowy figures. The air was thick with tension and the smell of cheap whiskey. He'd been gambling, trying to recoup his losses, desperate to save his farm. And he'd lost. Big time. The man he owed money to was Vincent Martel, a smooth-talking, ruthless individual with a reputation for collecting debts by any means necessary. Martel was known to be a front man for the Equinox Group. Liam had managed to pay off the debt tooth, eventually Fui, with a loan from his grandfather, but the experience had left him scarred, haunted by the knowledge of the darkness lurking beneath the surface of the horse racing world. He buried that part of his life, pretending it never happened, but now it was coming back to haunt him. He called Reynolds, relaying his conversation with Amelia and his past dealings with Martel, emphasizing the connection to the Equinox Group. Reynolds listened patiently, but his skepticism remained. Martel's a known associate, yes, but that was years ago, Doctor. It doesn't necessarily prove anything. Frustrated and desperate, Liam decided to take matters into his own hands. He drove back to Blackwood Farm, intending to confront Thorne. He had a feeling the answers he sought were hidden within those imposing walls. He found Silas overseeing the loading of several large, refrigerated containers onto a transport truck. "What is going on?" Liam demanded. Silas's face remained impassive. "Mr. Thorne has authorized the shipment of equine biological samples to a research facility in Switzerland." "What samples?" "Genetic material, blood, tissue, that sort of thing." "From the foal?" Silas hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Thorne is shipping the foal's genetic material out of the country." "Why?" "That is none of your concern, Doctor." Liam tried to get closer to the containers, but Silas blocked his path. "You are trespassing, Doctor. I advise you to leave." He knew he couldn't force his way through. He needed evidence, something concrete to take to the police. He decided to explore the farm, to see if he could find anything hidden. He wandered through the sprawling complex of barns and stables, his senses on high alert. He came across an old, dilapidated carriage house that he hadn't noticed before. The door was locked, but the hinges were rusted and weak. With a little effort, he managed to pry it open. The interior was dark and dusty, filled with forgotten relics, broken saddles, and piles of discarded equipment. But in the back of the carriage house, hidden behind a false wall, he found a secret room. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the building. It was immaculately clean, equipped with state-of-the-art genetic sequencing machines, cryogenic freezers, and rows of computer monitors displaying complex biological data. He began to sift through the files, his heart pounding in his chest. The documents revealed a chilling plan, Project Chimera, a clandestine program aimed at creating a genetically modified superhorse, combining the best traits of various breeds, pushing the boundaries of equine physiology to create a creature of unparalleled speed and power. The foal, with its mutated genes, was a critical component of the project. They weren't trying to fix the mutation, they were trying to understand it, to harness its potential. And then, he found a file with his name on it. It contained detailed information about his life, his past mistakes, his financial troubles. It was a comprehensive dossier, compiled over years of surveillance. A photograph of Emily taken just yesterday was attached. A single sentence had been typed beneath it: considerations to ensure continued cooperation. His blood ran cold. They were threatening his daughter. The Equinox Group wasn't just interested in the foal, they were using Emily as leverage, turning his personal life into a weapon against him. He needed to get Emily to safety. He raced to the school, his mind reeling with fear and anger. He found Emily outside, proudly displaying her science fair project. 4DA model of the equine nervous system. As he approached, he saw a woman standing nearby, talking to Emily. The woman was impeccably dressed, radiating an air of quiet authority. Her eyes, cold and calculating, met Liam's. "Such a clever girl," the woman said to Emily, her voice smooth and honeyed. "You have a bright future ahead of you. It would be a shame if anything were to interrupt it." Liam froze, his fists clenched at his sides. He recognized the woman immediately. Serena Vance, Eleanor's estranged sister, and a known operative for the Equinox Group. "Excuse me," Liam said, his voice dangerously low. "I need to take my daughter home." Serena Vance smiled, a chillingly empty expression. "Of course. Just remember, Doctor, some choices have consequences, and sometimes the greatest sacrifices must be made for the greater good." The air in Thorne's study reeked of old money and suppressed ambition. Polished mahogany, leather, bound books, and a disturbing collection of equine anatomy sketches adorned the room. Thorne sat behind a massive oak desk, his expression glacial. Serena Vance stood silently by his side, a watchful sentinel. "So," Thorne said, his voice dangerously calm, "you've discovered our little secret." Liam didn't bother with pleasantries. "Project Chimera, genetic manipulation. You're playing God, Thorne." Thorne chuckled, a dry, mirthless sound. "Shh, no, Doctor. We're simply accelerating evolution, harnessing the untapped potential of the equine genome. And that anomalous foal is the key. The foal is a victim, a deformed animal subjected to your twisted experiments. Deformed, you misunderstand. It is an evolutionary leap. Its iridescent skin isn't a flaw. It is an adaptation, a strengthening of the cellular structure. The foal possesses a unique genetic marker, a resilience we've never seen before. Combined with other carefully selected bloodlines, it could revolutionize the racing world. At what cost? Ethical boundaries, the well-being of these animals. Thorne waved a dismissive hand. "Sentimentality has no place in progress, Doctor. What matters is victory, power. And we are on the verge of achieving both." Liam remembered his father's words. "Greed is a sickness, Liam. It'll consume you if you let it." He dismissed it as old-fashioned wisdom then. Now, he saw the truth of it in Thorne's cold eyes. "My gambling debt wasn't a coincidence, was it?" Liam asked, his voice tight. "Martel wasn't interested in collecting money. He was interested in control, in making sure I stayed quiet." Thorne's lips curled into a predatory smile. "A necessary precaution. You were a talented vet, a respected figure in the community. We couldn't risk your interference. You used my desperation against me. We simply ensured your cooperation, a small price to pay for progress. Wouldn't you agree?" Liam lunged across the desk, grabbing Thorne by the lapels. "You're a monster." Serena Vance reacted instantly, stepping in front of Thorne, her hand reaching for something concealed beneath her jacket. "Doctor, I suggest you regain control of yourself." The situation escalated quickly. Liam threw a punch, connecting with Serena's jaw. She stumbled backward, but recovered quickly, drawing a small, silenced pistol. Liam dodged another attack, overturning the desk in the process. Books and papers flew through the air as he and Serena engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. Thorne watched from the sidelines, his expression a mixture of fury and amusement. He managed to disarm Serena, sending the pistol skittering across the polished floor. But he didn't have time to celebrate. Two more men, hulking figures in dark suits, entered the study, blocking the doorway. "It appears you've become a liability, Doctor," one of them said, cracking his knuckles. Liam knew he was outmatched. He needed to get to the Foal, to expose Thorne's operation. He fought with a desperate ferocity, relying on years of pent-up anger and a primal instinct for survival. He landed a blow to one man's stomach, sending him reeling, then used the other as a shield against Serena's attempts to regain control. He broke free of the struggle and raced out of the study, heading towards the main barn. Thorn and his men followed, their footsteps echoing through the hallways. He found the Foal in a secluded stall, heavily guarded. Two of Thorn's men stood watch, their expressions grim. He feigned surrender, walking slowly towards the stall, his hands raised. "Let the Foal go," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I just want to examine him." The guards exchanged a glance, then nodded cautiously. As Liam approached, he feigned a stumble, knocking into one of the guards, disorienting him. He grabbed a nearby pitchfork, swinging it with surprising force, sending the other guard sprawling. He quickly unlocked the stall and coaxed the Foal out, its legs trembling beneath it. The creature seemed to sense his urgency, nuzzling against his shoulder. "After him," Thorn roared, leading the chase. Liam burst out of the barn, leading the Foal across the manicured lawns. He knew he couldn't outrun them, but he could use the farm to his advantage. He headed towards the equipment shed, a cavernous building filled with tractors, machinery, and veterinary supplies. He spotted a large animal anesthesia delivery system, normally used for tranquilizing stallions. An idea sparked in his mind. He quickly reconfigured the system, attaching a hose to a high-pressure water tank. As Thorn and his men rounded the corner, Liam activated the system, unleashing a torrent of water, knocking them off their feet. He then grabbed a canister of injectable antibiotics, the large needle glinting in the sunlight. He didn't intend to harm them, but he would use anything at his disposal to slow them down. The chaos drew the attention of other farmhands, who scattered in confusion. Liam took advantage of the distraction, leading the Foal towards the perimeter fence. Thorn, dripping wet and seething with rage, cornered him near the stables. "You won't get away with this, O'Connell. That Foal belongs to me." "It belongs to no one," Liam retorted, his voice hoarse. "It is a living creature, not a commodity." Thorn lunged at him, swinging a heavy riding crop. Liam dodged the blow, but the crop clipped his shoulder, sending a searing pain through his arm. He stumbled backward, falling to the ground. Thorn advanced, his eyes filled with murderous intent, but before he could deliver the final blow, Liam rolled to the side, grabbing a handful of dirt and throwing it into Thorn's face. The distraction was enough to allow him to scramble to his feet and make a break for the fence. He hauled himself over, ignoring the stinging pain in his shoulder, and landed heavily on the other side. He looked back to see Thorn and his men converging on the fence, their faces contorted with fury. He knew they wouldn't give up. He urged the Foal forward, plunging into the dense woods bordering the farm. The trees offered some cover, but they also slowed their progress. He could feel the Foal's exhaustion mirroring his own. He kept running, fueled by adrenaline and desperation. He had to get to safety to expose Thorn's operation. But his shoulder throbbed with agonizing pain, and he knew he was losing blood. He stumbled and fell, collapsing onto the forest floor. The Foal nudged him gently, its iridescent skin shimmering in the dappled sunlight. He looked up to see Thorn and his men emerging from the trees, their guns drawn. He'd managed to escape with the Foal, but he was cornered, wounded and alone. It had just begun. The biting chill of the October night seeped into Liam's bones. Every breath was a jolt of pain, a reminder of the gash across his shoulder. He leaned heavily on the Foal, its warm body a small comfort in the vast, indifferent wilderness. He'd managed to bandage the wound with a torn piece of his shirt. But he knew he needed medical attention and a safe place to hide Amelia. He'd managed to call her from a payphone tighty, a relic he hadn't used in decades before his phone died. She'd sounded weak but resolute, instructing him to meet her at a remote cabin she owned further up the coast. The cabin was small, rustic, and tucked away amongst a dense thicket of trees. Amelia, pale but conscious, met him at the door, her expression a mixture of concern and disapproval. "You're a mess, Liam," she said, ushering him inside. "What were you thinking, trying to save a life?" he replied, gritting his teeth as she began to examine his wound. "You could have gotten yourself killed. And for what? A deformed foal. It is not just a foal, Amelia. It is a key to something much bigger, something dangerous. The Equinox Group is behind it. Genetic manipulation, unethical experiments." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "I suspected as much. What have you uncovered?" Liam recounted everything. The discovery of Project Chimera, Thorne's confession, the veiled threat against his daughter. Amelia listened in silence, her face growing increasingly grim. "They're ruthless," she said when he finished. "They'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets." She cleaned and stitched his wound with a practiced hand, her movements precise and efficient. "We need to get you to a hospital, but that is out of the question. Too risky." "I need to contact the authorities." Amelia shook her head. "Don't. I've already tried. I have contacts. The Equinox Group has infiltrated law enforcement at every level. You'll be walking into a trap." Frustration simmered within Liam. He was trapped, isolated, facing an enemy with seemingly unlimited resources. They spent the next few hours poring over the documents he'd managed to retrieve from Blackwood Farm, dissecting the genetic data, searching for irrefutable proof of the Equinox Group's crimes. Amelia's expertise was invaluable. She identified the specific genetic sequences that had been manipulated, the foreign genes that had been introduced, the horrifying extent of their ambition. "They're not just trying to create a faster racehorse," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "They're trying to engineer a superior being, a creature with enhanced strength, stamina, and resilience. They're playing with forces they don't understand." The foal, sensing their anxiety, nudged Amelia's hand with its muzzle. Liam felt a surge of protectiveness towards the creature, despite its deformities. Despite the danger it represented, he couldn't abandon it. "We need to expose them," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to show the world what they're doing." "Easier said than done," Amelia replied. "They've spent decades building a web of influence and secrecy. We need solid evidence, something that can't be dismissed or discredited." They spent the next day working tirelessly, compiling a dossier of evidence, pseudo genetic analyses, financial records, witness testimonies. But every time they made progress, they felt the tightening grip of the Equinox Group. Strange cars cruised past the cabin. Unidentified drones buzzed overhead. Anonymous calls flooded Amelia's phone, filled with static and veiled threats. They moved the foal several times, shifting it between abandoned barns and remote pastures, always one step ahead of their pursuers. The constant movement was exhausting, both for Liam and the creature. Liam's wound throbbed with unrelenting pain, and he knew he was running on adrenaline and desperation. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. He found himself wrestling with a terrifying moral dilemma. What if the only way to protect his daughter was to sacrifice the foal, to hand it over to the Equinox Group in exchange for Emily's safety? The thought chilled him to the core. He'd sworn an oath to protect all living creatures, and he couldn't betray that oath, even to save his own flesh and blood. But what choice did he have? He tried to push the thought from his mind, focusing on finding another way, another solution. But the fear gnawed at him, a constant, debilitating presence. He managed to establish a secure line of communication with a sympathetic journalist, a former colleague of Amelia's named Sarah Jenkins. He agreed to meet her in a secluded location, to hand over the evidence and tell his story. But the meeting never happened. As he was preparing to leave, Amelia's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. She answered, her face paling with each passing second. She listened in silence for a moment, then slowly lowered the phone, her eyes wide with horror. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They have Emily." He lunged for the phone, his heart slamming against his ribs. What did they say?" Amelia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. They said she is safe for now, but they want the foal. They want it delivered to Blackwood Farm within 24 hours. Otherwise, the sentence hung in the air, unspoken but understood. The Equinox Group had escalated the game. They weren't just threatening him anymore. They'd taken his daughter, and his worst nightmare had come true. Desperation felt like a physical weight, crushing the air from Liam's lungs. Emily's face, pale and frightened, flashed behind his eyelids. He wouldn't bargain, he wouldn't negotiate, he would simply take her back. He'd laid a trap, a reckless, desperate gamble, built on the assumption that Thorne's arrogance would be his downfall. He'd sent a message Thursday through a coded advertisement in a horse trading magazine, offering to deliver the package at the annual Autumn Classic auction, a prestigious event held at a sprawling equestrian center an hour outside Lexington. It was a public place, teeming with potential witnesses. Thorne wouldn't risk a scene, or so Liam hoped. He'd insisted Amelia stay behind. The risk was too great. She'd argued, protested, but ultimately conceded. She'd managed to contact an FBI agent, Agent Davies, who'd been quietly investigating the Equinox Group for years, hampered by a lack of concrete evidence. Amelia's dossier had changed everything, but cautioned that moving against the syndicate would be complex and dangerous. He arrived at the auction with the foal secured in a rented horse trailer. His shoulder, still aching, was strapped tight. He felt like a walking cadaver, fueled by fury and fear. The air thrummed with the nervous energy of potential buyers, the clipped tones of auctioneers, and the restless stomping of horses. He parked the trailer in a secluded area near the perimeter fence, deliberately choosing a spot with limited visibility. He knew Thorne would send someone to scout the location. He needed to be ready. It didn't take long. A black SUV, identical to the ones he'd seen trailing Amelia's cabin, pulled up alongside the trailer. Two of Thorne's henchmen emerged, their faces impassive. "Let's see what you've brought," one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. Liam stepped forward, his hands empty. "Thorne wants to see the foal, doesn't he? I figured he wouldn't send his prized stallions to inspect it." The henchman smirked. "But don't mistake clever for safe. Tell Thorne I'm willing to trade. His niece, Bethany, is a lovely girl. I hear she has a bright future. It would be a shame if anything unfortunate were to happen to her." The henchman's smirk vanished. He exchanged a glance with his partner, the message clear. Liam was playing dirty. "You wouldn't I? I have nothing left to lose. You think I care about prison, about my life? My daughter's life is on the line." The henchman's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then barked an order into the receiver. "Tell Mr. Thorne he is here, with the package." Within minutes, Thorne arrived, accompanied by Serena Vance and a contingent of armed security guards. He surveyed Liam with cold disdain. "You're a fool, O'Connell," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can outsmart me. I'm betting on your desperation, Thorne. You want that foal. You've invested too much to walk away empty-handed. That is your weakness." "Where is my daughter?" Liam demanded, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. Thorne signaled Serena Vance, who nodded and gestured towards a nearby security vehicle. A young girl, looking terrified, was escorted out of the vehicle. Emily. Liam's heart lurched. He wanted to run to her, to hold her tight. But he knew he couldn't. "Not yet. Release her," Liam said, his eyes fixed on Thorne. "Then you can have the foal." "Not so fast," Thorne replied. "I want assurances. I want to see the foal. I want to be certain it is the same creature. You'll get your inspection, but Emily goes first. The standoff stretched on, tense and agonizing. Liam knew he was outgunned, outnumbered, but he had one advantage. He knew the farm. He knew the layout, the blind spots, the secret passages. He'd spent years working there, and remembered details Thorn likely had forgotten. Suddenly, a siren wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. What is going on? Thorn snarled. Before he could react, a fleet of FBI vehicles descended on the auction grounds, surrounding the perimeter. Agent Davies emerged, accompanied by a swarm of armed agents. "Elias Thorn," Davies announced, her voice amplified by a megaphone. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, genetic manipulation, and multiple counts of animal cruelty. Serena Vance, you are also under arrest." Chaos erupted. Thorn and his security guards attempted to resist, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the FBI agents. A brief, violent skirmish ensued, but it was quickly brought under control. Liam watched, stunned, as Thorn was handcuffed and led away, his face contorted with rage. Serena Vance followed, her eyes flashing with hatred. Davies approached Liam, her expression grim. "We've been building a case against the Equinox Group for years. Your information was the final piece of the puzzle." She nodded towards Emily, who was being comforted by an FBI agent. "Your daughter is safe. She'll undergo a medical evaluation, then be reunited with you." Liam rushed to Emily, embracing her tightly. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry I put you through this." Emily clung to him, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you'd come for me, Dad." The foal, momentarily forgotten in the chaos, stood calmly in the trailer, its iridescent skin shimmering in the afternoon sun. The aftermath was a whirlwind of interviews, legal proceedings, and media coverage. The Equinox Group was dismantled, its assets seized, its members brought to justice. Liam testified against Thorn and Vance, recounting the harrowing events of the past few weeks. He watched as their empire crumbled, their secrets exposed. Finally, after weeks of uncertainty and fear, Liam and Emily were able to begin rebuilding their lives. He'd lost his farm, his reputation, almost everything he held dear. But he'd gained something more valuable, his daughter's safety and a renewed sense of purpose. He visited the foal regularly at the equine sanctuary where it had been placed, a sprawling farm dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating abused and neglected animals. The sanctuary's veterinarian, Dr. Chen, was studying the creature, attempting to understand its unique genetic makeup. It wasn't a normal life. The foal would likely always be different, an anomaly. But it was safe, and that was all that mattered. One afternoon, as Liam and Emily stood watching the foal graze in a sun-drenched pasture, Emily turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "He is beautiful, Dad." Liam looked at the foal, its iridescent skin catching the light, and a sense of peace washed over him. They'd been through hell, but they'd survived. And despite everything, there was still hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they would face it together. And as they watched the foal, a symbol of resilience and the untamed spirit of life, Liam knew they would endure. The shadows had receded, but the memory of what they had faced would forever linger, a quiet reminder of the price of secrets and the enduring power of hope.